This is technically our fourth podcast. It's my first video podcast. So, Shelby Williams, appreciate you inviting me into your home to do this very last minute, interview discussion.
Yeah.
So,
happy to have you.
So, full disclosure, because I know a lot of people are going to be listening. This originally was supposed to be with Ellen Lovelace, who is your opponent in the Collin County GOP chair race.
Right.
And so I'd offered to do an interview with her, and she agreed to it last week. Last night she tells me she's not available and she's not interested in doing an interview.
Oh,
and
not
so,
interested.
well, I don't know if I'm using the exact, she just said that she is doing things a certain way and that she just wants to continue focusing on running her campaign. So I understand. But I had messaged you and I said, hey, I've got this free spot. Do you want to sit and chat? And you were available. So I appreciate that. So right now, you're city council.
That's right.
Plano.
Plano
How long?
City Council. Since 2019, 5 years, twice elected.
Wow. And now you're running for chair for Plano or Collin County.
Collin County, that's right. Additionally running for chair. A lot of people ask, are you going to have to give up your city council seat? The answer is no.
Got it.
Because it's a party role, I can do both simultaneously.
Gotcha.
In fact, I think there's a very strong correlation between the benefit to the county party with what I already do in my Plano City Council role, engaging the community. And I think especially with the state the Collin County GOP is in right now, being able to have a sitting councilman with the county's largest city representing the party simultaneously in the community would lend us some gravitas I think we really need.
What do you said the state the party's currently in. What do you mean by that? What for people that aren't aware of Plano politics?
Sure. And it's not just Plano. In fact, Plano could be considered an analogous to where we are now as a county party, because back when I was elected in 2019, it was a very contentious election, and Plano was almost on the brink of political civil war. Lily Bow and I were elected in 2019, and I can't claim sole credit for this. I was part of bringing Plano together to heal that, and such that at the last election last year, that we had when I was up for re-election, we had 2 uncontested seats. I never thought I'd see the day again in Plano, but unfortunately mine wasn't one of them. But everybody was chill. And we accomplished that with Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Libertarians just weren't in the mix, nothing against libertarians. But the Collin County GOP, I guess, without the external targets, have fallen to infighting. So much so that almost a third of the executive committee has resigned. They're just they hung it up, said, you know what, I'm not up for this anymore, I'm out of here. We only have around 170, 180, the number fluctuates daily, active precinct chairs, and about 50 have just walked. Now, some of them have just said, I'm out of here, cut me off immediately. Most just didn't file to rerun, and come June 17th, they're gone. But
So sorry to interrupt. Are you going to see a substantial deduction in current precinct chairs come June 17th?
Yes. Now, 50 of them, it's not going to be a net loss of 50. It's just 50 that have hung it up.
Okay, gotcha.
There are some new precinct chairs coming in. They either ran a contested election in the primaries to be a precinct chair, or they just stepped up as a new precinct chair. There are a handful of people that were sworn in recently that didn't file to run, so they came in as technically interim chairs. Right. So there are some coming in, but the environment, I'll call it a toxic environment, within the executive committee that's been building for years, I've watched it, has come to a point where it's so divisive that people are just saying, you know what, I'm done, I'm out of here. And at the last executive committee meeting, there was an actual physical altercation, which you covered.
Right, yeah, that was between Stephen Callis and John Donovan, I remember. Yeah, I saw it in person.
Yeah.
Things are pretty heated. What would you say are some of the things, and I'm sure there's a lot, but what are some of the things that are causing all the infighting? Because the infighting happens everywhere,
Right.
We get tips from all over Texas about chairs being shady, money being misappropriated, personalities, and all kinds of things. We might have something coming out where a whole county has signed, precinct chairs have signed something like for no confidence in a guy running for vice chair. And so, what would you say is some of the big things that are causing all the infighting in Collin GOP?
Well, it's like I told you, I think 3 months ago, you asked like what were some of the most divisive groups in Texas. And I declined to name specific groups, but I said usually these things fall to divisions over people and policy. And I think it's both in this case. Some people try to blame Abraham George. This started before Abraham. I was, honestly, I was a precinct chair when it started, and part of the genesis of it was around my election to Plano City Council. One of the biggest divisive factors currently in the party is over how we get involved in local elections, city council, school board, college district. And these are quote unquote nonpartisan races, which only means that an R or a D doesn't show up next to our name on the ballot, and we cannot legally publish our party affiliation in our printed material. But it doesn't make people nonpartisan. There are no nonpartisan people because we are what we are. We believe what we believe.
Absolutely.
And whether we tilt one way or another, a little bit or a lot, those are our values, and those are what people elect. So, but under Texas law, we run as quote unquote nonpartisan, and so the real contention starting back in 2019 was how does the party get involved in local elections to advance Republican values when we don't have a primary system for the Republicans to duke it out like we just had, like we're still going through with my race for GOP chair. And when I ran in 2019, I received the executive committee's endorsement. And that was our first real foray as a county party into endorsing in local elections. And I think everybody recognizes that we need to be involved somehow in local elections, but since we don't have the primary process, we got to be smart about it. And my opponent at the time I was recruited to run by the same people who had recruited him 4 years prior. So there was a lot of dissatisfaction, but not universal dissatisfaction. Roughly 20% of the executive committee was behind my opponent. And when the party endorsed me, the actual county party endorsed me, that didn't change their minds. And in fact, I watched the division happen in real time, and I was grateful to receive the endorsement. It helped, not as much as Governor Abbott's endorsement helped that year.
You were endorsed by Abbott.
I was endorsed by Governor Abbott, yes. Which, let's be real, carried a lot more weight than the county party's endorsement. I was still grateful to receive the county party's endorsement, though, but I watched the ramifications of that unfold in real time because, let's say you and I are both precinct chairs. I was a precinct chair at the time, and I back my horse and you back your horse. Maybe I feel betrayed by you if you're a friend or just another precinct chair because you're backing somebody I don't. Well, we get divided over our backing of people. We get passionate about it. And so maybe you feel betrayed by me. But when you feel betrayed by the party itself, by the institution itself, that's bad. And it has long-lasting repercussions. But we've doubled down on that since. So at the time, I took the endorsement. Some people have called me hypocritical because I've changed my stance over time, but realistically, I've absorbed new data. I've watched what's happened as a party as we endorse in local elections. Not only is our track record poor, but it's caused so many divisions and it has alienated lifelong Republicans around the party, including numerous local elected officials.
So one of the things then is endorsements in local elections.
That's correct.
In nonpartisan local elections. And so there's a substantial amount of people that want to continue endorsing, and then there's another substantial amount of people that want to stop that.
That's right. That's right. And that's one of the big facets that's driven such a wedge. Some people don't even recognize the genesis of it because they're newer.
And if I recall correctly, the win rate right now for Collin County GOP's endorsements is pretty low.
It is.
It's like in the 30%-ish
or
area.
less.
Yeah. And so do you think that in some cases the current state of the GOP's endorsements actually hurt the candidates? Or do you think it just has no effect?
No, I think it depends on the race, to be honest. The race, the city, or the school district, and the candidates. You know, everything's a little different every election cycle. You can't apply a cookie cutter methodology to every election cycle,
right?
Let alone every race or candidate. But one of the biggest problems, and I said this at the Collin County Patriots Forum back in early January, is that the vetting committee, by and large, applies a litmus test of who says the most conservative stuff.
Right.
And unless you're an incumbent, you don't have a track record. So it literally is who can say the most conservative stuff. And there are three legs to the stool. The first is who says the most conservative stuff. What are your actual policy positions? And are you going to champion the policy positions that are important to Republicans or conservatives? They're not necessarily the same thing. Strong overlap, but still. Second, can you even get elected? If you can't, then there's no point asking the first question. Are you electable? Third, these are all equally important. Third, assuming you are elected, can you actually advance those principles on the other side, which is what it's all about, or are you going to become the next legislative pariah that doesn't get anything done? Yeah,
and there's a lot of those. We have some very quote-unquote strong conservatives in Tex Ledge in Austin, and they haven't passed a single bill. I mean, I think Tinderholt is one of them. He's propped up as one of the strongest right-wing conservatives, and to my knowledge, he hasn't passed a single thing.
That's right.
He's been down there for, I think, 2 sessions, maybe more now, and not a single bill. And he's viewed as a conservative hero. So, yeah, and electability, I think, is another thing. During the most recent elections, you saw a lot of endorsements from a lot of really great people. I mean, Ken Paxton threw out double-digit endorsements across the whole state, and he was endorsing total goofballs. One of them, Bianca Gracia, who never stood a chance. And running against Briscoe Cain, which is a phenomenal conservative.
He is.
Briscoe Cain.
And he gets stuff done.
He does, yes, he does. He's actually effective. But his ultimate sin was supporting the impeachment of Ken Paxton.
Right.
And so, that group that's kind of works with Paxton puts up Gracia to run against him, and she's a total clown. And I think she doesn't even come within swinging distance, but she gets an endorsement from him, from Sid Miller, and from some others, and it's totally just a revenge endorsement. There's no considering any electability. Is this person actually qualified to win? And they just endorsed her. And so I think it's what you just said, where they have almost this right-wing pageant of let's see who can get on stage and say the craziest or farthest right or strongest conservative stuff, and we're just going to support that guy even though they have no track record. And it's not working. Right. It's not working. So you kind of brought up something that I wanted to touch on. One of the biggest criticisms for your run is your ability to have time to do both, right? I see that a lot on Facebook, and the Facebook arguments, like many all over the state, get pretty heated. But one of the criticisms that he did see is, you're going to be too busy. You can't be city council plus GOP chair. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, a handful of things. First, time is not a qualification for anything. Plenty of homeless people in the area have lots of time. We should recruit them to be chair because they've got time. Time doesn't equal results. And as somebody who doesn't have to just go say the most conservative stuff, I have an actual track record. Anybody can go look and see what I've done since I first ran for office and even before. In fact, I was busier when I first ran for council in 2019 than I am now. I was a sitting precinct chair. I was running my first campaign and then actually doing the job in office. I had a younger family than I do now, still had my career. I was Texas State Director of Convention of States at the same time, and I served on 2 boards. So, this is a lighter load by comparison.
Gotcha.
Plus, there's, like I said, going to be some strong overlap between what I can do, what I already do on Plano City Council, interacting with the community, to simultaneously be Collin County Republican Party chair, wearing both hats at the same time, representing the Republican Party in the community, can make some real inroads that we've never had. And on top of that, like I said, time isn't a qualification. Results is what we measure success by. I don't measure my success in hours spent. I measure it in things achieved. And I've achieved a ton over the past several years. And there's no reason to suspect that I wouldn't as Collin County Republican Party chair in a tenth of the time as somebody stepping in new, not knowing what they're doing.
Gotcha. What you brought up another topic that I see some criticism on Facebook or feedback is Convention of States. For people that are listening or that are watching this, explain very briefly what that is.
Sure. At a high level, Convention of States is It's both a thing and it's an organization. They get conflated. The Convention of States organization advocates for the exercise of a convention under Article 5 of the Constitution to propose amendments, the kind of which Congress would never propose itself, to end run Congress and amend the Constitution to specifically limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, and limit the terms of office for federal officials and members of Congress. In other words, limit the federal government's time, money, and power. That's the whole organization. Now, a lot of things are said about it. We don't have to get into that here. I was Texas State Director, volunteer, on a volunteer basis for that organization for 2 years. I stepped down in 2020. It was the same year I stepped down as a precinct chair in Collin County. But there are some folks who have consternation over what that might do.
Gotcha.
I'm not concerned, obviously, but it has nothing to do with the role of GOP chair, just like it has nothing to do with my role in Plano City Council.
Well, some would argue that the support of Convention of States, or basically Convention of States, is amending the Constitution, right? So some would say that the fact that you support amending the Constitution or Convention of States does affect how you would approach your policy positions or the way you govern as Republican GOP chair of Collin County.
And that is a concern some folks have. All I can say is it hasn't yet. I have, I've been on Plano City Council for 5 years, and I've been active in the state legislature for 5 years.
You bring up a good point.
More than that, I should say.
I've never seen anybody complain about your work on City Council for Plano.
No, in fact, like I said, the people who recruited me to run in 2019, they all supported me when I ran for re-election last year. They were happy with the job I did, and then a lot of other people, including moderates, were happy as well. Yeah, so I didn't alienate the conservatives in the job I did.
Yeah, the Facebook comments are insane. I mean, every day I get notifications of something in the Facebook groups about this run, you know, and there's currently a big scandal going on, ironically, with an article we wrote regarding some text messages. So for those that are listening or watching, we published an article, and the cat's out of the bag. You and several others actually gave me the text, and it included a gentleman by the name of Evan, I even forget his last name. Yeah, Altimus, who at the time, what was he like? He was social media director, right?
Communications chair.
Communications chair.
Committee
So
chair.
he ran the Collin County GOP Twitter page.
That's right.
Which anybody could go back, and they may be deleted now, but it was a total disaster. It
was off the rails.
It was crazy. And I mean, I didn't say that as somebody who gets off the rails quite a bit on Twitter sometimes too. But I mean,
Twitter's good for that.
Yeah, Twitter is good for that. It's a lot of fun. But he was just totally unhinged on Twitter. And that's just my opinion. But the dude had like no business running. He was attacking all sorts of Republicans. You can argue that he was attacking bad Republicans or whatever. But at the end of the day, I almost feel like, you know, your job when you're working for the GOP, especially as a comms director or comms chair or whatever, you're kind of just supposed to, you're not supposed to get these kind of like little bickerings and fights, you know. Anyway.
Supposed to positively represent the GOP.
Yeah. And so anyway, you know, we put out these text messages, and the story basically was that Evan was trying to, and please correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, trying to coordinate along with a big group of people, getting himself elected as the temp chair in order to help prop up your opponent, Ellen.
Correct.
And some of the things that he referenced in his text was that she felt that she was weak or inexperienced and she needed the help. Those are his words.
Right, his words.
His words. And he felt that she was inexperienced. He felt that she was weak, and he was a supporter of hers, which is interesting that you would support somebody that you feel is weak. And so he's trying to like organize all of this, and you know, we published it as is. And then we later, within I think like an hour, maybe 2 hours, we published the entire text thread, because we initially had just published a couple texts, and the text thread scrolling was like 5 minutes long. It's just a huge text thread. So we put out the whole thing so that people could see that we weren't cherry picking. But like Project Veritas, like James O'Keefe gets this feedback a lot. He'll release a video, and the Democrats always say, oh, you're missing context.
Right.
It's photoshopped. It's out of place. Like there's context missing. And then he puts out the whole video. People are like, well, you're still missing context. And it's like, just admit this guy screwed up. So anyway, we put out this thing, and he ends up, did he get removed or did he step down?
I'm not sure, actually.
There's no official.
He's not there.
He's not there, right?
And
yeah, so he's no longer,
however that happened,
in that position of comms chair or director or whatever. And so we put that out. And frankly, to me, this idea or this plan to organize a bunch of people to get somebody elected, that's just politics. Like, it's really not that big. It's a big deal in the sense that, like, this guy's maybe using his position to help get somebody elected. But at the end of the day, like, welcome to politics. Like, everybody's doing it. Everybody in every county, city, state across the U.S. is using their influence or their position to help get somebody else elected.
In one way or another, yes, but I'd say that not all methods are equal.
How would you say this is different?
Well, the role of the county chair, I mean, I've endorsed people for a long, long time. You know, people have sought my endorsements. I've deliberately not endorsed in any elections in this primary, specifically because of the role I'm running for. I think the role of the county chair needs to be neutral for the health and the long-term viability of the party. So that being said, Ultimus had thrown his hat in the ring to run for interim chair, interim county chair. And it appeared to be with the pretty sole goal of tipping the scales for my opponent in the runoff, because he would only serve as chair for like 3 months and then he's gone. And that was the crux of why he was telling the folks in that text thread he was throwing his hat in the ring.
And in the text, he specifically says he's going to do things and give her credit for it.
That's right.
Which is just kind of like, whoa.
So that's the sort of thing that not everybody does. And I would hope not everybody does. And if I do it, I expect people to hold me to account.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. But I guess as somebody who sees a lot of these backroom deals, it doesn't surprise me. For me, it's just another Tuesday, whatever day.
Yeah. No, I can't say I'm surprised. I just don't condone that sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. But I just didn't see it. Like, there's so many people that have made a big deal out of this quote unquote scandal of these text messages. And for full clarification, to my knowledge, and from what I've seen and from what the text messages show, there is no evidence showing that Ellen had anything to do with this.
Correct.
She had nothing to do with this. She didn't organize it. She wasn't even aware of it.
Correct. And I never even implied she did. She's out there saying now that said explicitly she's involved, but
about that. So there's no evidence showing that she was involved. And I even talked to her, and I flat asked her, "Did you know about it?" She didn't know, and I did trust her. I believe her too, of course. But her supporters, I'm on this Facebook thread and I get notifications for it. This article or this scandal is 2-3 months old now, 2 months old. And there's still a thread with like 80 plus posts about, and people are still talking about these text messages. They're still actively defending her as if she is guilty. And as an outsider who's like, or if I was an outsider watching this happen and reading these messages.
And that's all her supporters framing it that way.
That's what's weird to me is if, admittingly, she didn't do anything, had anything to do with it. So why is everybody defending her and setting up this frame as if she did know about it? They're like, oh, the text messages weren't a big deal. You know, you're missing context. And it's like, well, she didn't have anything to do with it. So why does it matter?
Right. Like and none of my supporters are even out there talking about it.
At the end of the day, this guy got caught using his position to try to prop up a candidate. Another day in politics to me, but not really, but a deal, a scandal, but not that big of a one. And the candidate didn't know anything about it. So it's just like a one and done thing to me. And this crying and whining and bickering on Facebook about it is just, it's the
gift that keeps on giving.
It's insane to me. And, you know, I just don't see why it's such a big deal, but they've insisted that it is. And then going further, they've started to say, like they do with the James O'Keefe stuff, oh, you're missing context. You're missing some context, right? And I said, okay, like, please, like, admitting I'm not a Collin County resident. I live in Dallas County. I don't live anywhere. I live in Carrollton, so one city over, but I'm in Dallas County.
We still have some room if you'd like to
I would love
come to the light.
But I like you. I like Ellen. Ellen, I actually really like. I think she's a great person. I like you. I don't have any complaints about either of you, so I don't really have favor towards one or the other. But you know, even she's come out and said, oh, you're missing context. So I keep asking people, please give me the context. Like, send me the text. I will publish them in a heartbeat. Like, I would love to.
They have the text thread.
So send it to me. And nobody has. I've practically begged for it. And I've even posted it in the Facebook groups. Like, if you've got context, just send it to me. My email remains empty as far as texts go. So it's a weird scandal. I don't get it. And I don't understand all the screeching behind it. It's odd. But, you know, I don't know. I guess there's nothing else to talk about when it comes to scandals in this race. I'm going to ask you an interesting question.
Yeah.
What would you say is, for your opponent, Ellen Lovelace, What would you say is the reason people are supporting her? A good reason people are supporting her?
I think from a good reason. She's very charismatic. And I told her this myself early on. I love her energy. She gets people enthused.
Yeah, she's very likable.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
And the election started with the insiders, the people who live inside the bubble in the executive committee, because nobody else knew who filed until actual campaigns started. So I think the initial people within the executive committee and the bubble, the grassroots activists, a lot of people supported her because she's not me.
Gotcha. But nobody's had a complaint about your run during city council.
No. The entire opposition to me, like I've had universal acclaim for my entire time.
And how long is that?
Elected 5 years.
So you've been in office for 5 years, not a single complaint from the
Not a
from
single
the Conservatives.
complaint. That's right.
But all of a sudden you run for Collin GOP and there's an issue.
Because of the way it was done. And I mean, cat's out of the bag now. I was asked by John Myers fairly late in the game if I would consider running. And everybody, including myself, thought that when John became interim chair late last year, last fall, he was going to run for a full term. That's what he told everybody, and I have no reason to disbelieve that. He fully intended to. And then he was suffering a pretty severe health crisis, and he approached me asking me if I would consider running. So I had a decision to make in relatively short order. And in order to get on the ballot for county chair, you got to gather petition signatures from sitting precinct chairs. So it's not like just out in the public. You don't just pay a fee and file. You got to get signatures from precinct chairs. So the day, with the clock running out, the day before the filing deadline, I started calling folks asking for signatures. And I continued to gather them on the day of filing deadline. And I turned in my petition and my application, and I left for a council meeting. And then one of the folks who actually signed my petition, David Russell, from what I hear, he sent out an email asking for all precinct chairs to get to headquarters. From what I understand, didn't even tell them why. So a bunch of people flooded into headquarters, and he was trying to get anybody to run. So that
like
I
a
would
bat signal to stop you almost.
That's a good way to put it, bat signal, so that I wouldn't run unopposed.
So you sent out an email just saying, hey, everybody come to the Collin County
That's what I understand.
Okay.
I never received that email. I'm not a precinct chair anymore. But that's what I understand. And they were trying to, from what I understand, I was at a council meeting at the time, where interestingly the bomb squad had to be called in. We'll do that on another podcast.
Jeez.
There's a teaser.
Collin County's crazy, man.
But two people ultimately ran. From what I understand, they tried to get Cindy Darlin there, who ran unsuccessfully against John Myers for interim chair. She couldn't get in there. That was done. So Ellen, she told me this herself, she was there to file for precinct chair. She was an interim precinct chair, served a little less than 2 years, I think, as a precinct chair. And then they were trying to recruit somebody to run for county chair. And she said, okay, why not? Howard Powers did the same thing while he was there. And so that's how we wound up with a three-way race.
Right.
And I'll just share candidly with you the desire, or I should say the assumption that I was going to be an extension of John Myers or Abraham George or Mark Reed, or go as far back as you like in county chairs, was a lot of what drove this. Because again, no complaints about me for 5 years. I'm arguably the most recognized conservative local elected official in Collin County, just because I'm so outspoken. But zero complaints. They just didn't want John's pick to be elected unopposed. And so that's how we wound up in this. People backed their horses and have doubled down every step of the way.
And you were 1 point short of avoiding a runoff, right?
I was
1.5, something like
I was a quarter point short, not even, of avoiding a runoff. So
Wow.
you have to get an actual majority, not just a plurality to win. So 50% plus one vote. And I ended with 49.76% of the vote, 0.24 votes shy of locking it all up on March 5th. But that's the nature of the game. And so here we are in a 2.5 month runoff.
A question not specifically Collin County related, but maybe. Do you feel that sometimes the activists in the GOP are out of touch? And let me say what I mean about it. They, obviously the people involved in Republican politics are very passionate, very strong right-wing, very conservative. But do you feel that sometimes they're an outlier to what the common Republican voter is?
Absolutely. I've said this for a very long time, and it's one of the things that our candidate vetting committee needs to recognize. We as activists live inside a tiny little bubble, and we think that everybody outside the bubble thinks like everybody inside the bubble, and it just ain't true. Case in point, and this was when you were live tweeting my event in February, and I was talking about how people usually get divided over people in policy, and Ken Paxton was a good example of somebody around whom division was occurring. Right. And then one of our precinct chairs tweeted in response to your live tweet about my comment, he commented on that saying, "That's not true. The entire executive committee supports Ken Paxton," which was a revealing statement. And by the way, he supports my opponent. That was the universe, the executive committee. And no, the executive committee supports Ken Paxton, so there's no division. However, all you got to do is actually talk to people out in the community, and they'll tell you how they feel one way or the other. And there's a lot of division. Not everybody supports Ken Paxton. I mean, I spoke out against the impeachment on the Collin County Courthouse steps 2 days after, but some people are glad he was impeached. Some people think he should go to jail for the rest of his life. And the idea, I don't agree, but the idea that there's no division around Ken Paxton, that everybody feels the same, is ludicrous. But there's this mindset inside the bubble that thinks the bubble is the entire universe.
Yeah, I think the left is guilty of this too. With the extreme far left is the ones that promote the grooming and the transing and this chopping up of kids' body parts and all that weird stuff, right? And they feel like everybody in their circle, which is Democrat or left leaning, should feel the same way. And I've talked to Democrats that don't feel that way. They do exist. Unfortunately, the news does highlight a lot of the worst, which of course, why wouldn't they? And we do that too. And I think that it's important to be self-aware that the right falls into that too. We do not, and I'm not saying this like I disagree, but there are people in the very, very, very far right that have some bad ideas, right? Obviously. And I think everybody's job is just to promote their ideas as much as possible, but we fall into what you said, like a bubble where we think everybody in our bubble is the plurality. That's like the majority. It's not the case. So I don't know. It almost feels like, a lot of these people in leadership positions in Republican counties are just completely out of touch with the average Republican voter. Right. So I remember a survey coming out about...
They don't talk to the average Republican
voter. Yeah, they don't.
Voter.
And it's so funny. I bring this up so much. I go to a lot of Republican events, conservative events, and club meetings and stuff. And it's the same people at the same meetings. It doesn't matter what day or what group. You go there, and I'm going to see so-and-so. I know for sure I'm going to see so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And I go to a different meeting a week later for a completely different organization across town, not even in the same city, and those exact same set of people are going to be there. And so I think we naturally begin to feel like our bubble is actually bigger than it is, because it's like everywhere I go, this person agrees with me, so my ideas are perfect. And that's not the case. So I guess, do you plan on changing that if you get elected?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, and how do you fix something like that?
Well, arguably the most important pillar of my platform is, as I say, reaching the countless Republicans who don't yet know they're Republican. You can't do that inside the echo chamber at the same club meetings every week where you treat it as your social time and you're just hanging out with your clique. You have to go out into the community, you have to talk to people who don't show up at these club meetings, and you have to interact with them on a human level about things they care about. We saw a lot of people come into the Republican Party, including a lot of precinct chairs in 2020. People pick your event in 2020, and people didn't like it, and they said, okay, I've had enough of this, and they wanted to get involved. And so many of them stepped up they started becoming activists, or they signed up as precinct chairs, what have you. Many of them were left rudderless, including in Collin County, because we were already starting to go off the rails at that point. Not nearly as bad as we are now, but we were already factionalized. So some of the new people come in, and this isn't just Collin County, new people come in to a divisive environment, and they get sucked into one faction or the other. You know, you're going to be a greaser or a soc.
Right.
And it's human nature. And I think part of the challenge that we have is we're eating our own, because without any serious challenge from the left in Collin County, except maybe at the local level, schools, school boards and whatnot, we're falling to infighting. Humans tend to self-segregate with people they are comfortable with and who think like them. That's why you see the same people at every club meeting. We factionalize ourselves, and it does make us feel insulated and like our bubble is bigger than it really is. We have to get outside of our bubble, outside of our comfort zone, and we can't go out into the community and start denigrating them as rhinos or commies.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the left is guilty of this too. I mean, I this is only like our 4th episode. I've tried to reach out to Democrats to be on the show, and they refuse. They won't talk. There's no crosstalk, right? We finally had somebody last week, who's he identifies as a moderate leftist. And we had a great conversation. We talked for like an hour. And even before the show started, we talked for like a good 30 minutes. And I was finally like, we're having a good convo. Let's just start recording. I think just people need to talk more. You know, you can convince people of ideas if you just have an open line of communication. But to your point, like, everybody's just really interested in labeling everybody as like a rhino or a fraud. Do you think that, obviously, I mean, I know you really focus on Collin County, but do you think that the rest of Texas is kind of suffering from this sort of stuff?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think that this could trigger Texas going blue with this attitude?
Well, eventually, yeah. I mean, Texas went red. Texas used to be deep blue.
Yeah.
Texas went red.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, that pendulum can shift if we're not careful, absolutely. And here's the thing, just within Collin County, but this applies increasingly statewide, I have spoken with multiple local elected officials who are lifelong Republicans who feel ostracized and alienated by the party and don't want to have anything to do with the party. They're not going to go vote Democrat. They're lifelong Republicans, but they're not getting involved. They're not proudly bearing the Republican brand because the party as an entity has turned their back on them. And that goes back to endorsing in local elections and how we have to approach getting involved in local elections strategically.
I'm going to ask you a controversial question. You don't have to name names.
Okay.
But do you feel like, with that in mind, and that plan of like continuing to cause infighting and making Republican officials feel unwelcome in the party, do you think that with this chair race coming up, there are certain people that are that are nominated for this position that are going to continue that process?
Well, absolutely.
Okay. And you don't have to name names, but you feel like there's some, at least a couple. Or some.
Okay. You're talking about the Collin County GOP?
No, I'm talking about the RPT.
Oh, the RPT.
Yeah. Do you feel that there's any candidates that will continue that process of infighting and ostracizing people?
Possibly a majority of them. I'm not going to name names.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think...
And you don't think that it's going to do the party any favors?
No, but I do think a balance has to be struck between fighting and standing for your principles.
Right.
And that means electorally, legislatively, and not backing down. And actually recognizing, I say this all the time, I think 90% of our problems would evaporate if we would look at one another as fellow children of God first and everything else second.
So you think it's possible to both stand for your values and be welcoming to those who disagree with you?
That's exactly how I had all the conservative support last year for my reelection on council that I had back in 2019, and a bunch of moderate and even a little left support, which I would say would be a red flag if I didn't simultaneously have all the same conservative support.
Gotcha.
Because I wasn't always good at this, I'll say that. When I first was elected in 2019, I was a little fiery. I tempered that a little bit. I've still got a little fire. I tempered that deliberately, and I worked on forging relationships. And I forged some strong ones. Doesn't mean I could get everybody to do what I want, or convince everybody to my way of thinking, but I was able to accomplish all of my campaign promises in 15 months. And I made some big ones. That would have been impossible without actually trying to work with people on a human level. If I just came in there and took the dais and started, hurling invective and denigrating and blaming.
Kind of reminds me of us. Like and you've read us long enough. We started off as a pretty firebrand, aggressive, strong right rag, and we still are very strong right. But we're focused more is on exposing scams, and we've made a lot of good relationships on every side of the aisle.
Yeah, and you've really matured as a publication.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It feels good, but there are a lot of people. I shouldn't say there's a lot of people. There's a notable amount of people that are upset that we have become more stabilized. There's some people that we accuse the left of this all the time, that they watch their CNN or their NBC and they watch it as almost like a mental circle jerk. They want to just be told that everything they're doing is right. And we make fun of them for that. But then the people on our own side are just as guilty.
And that's not a left or a right thing. It's a human thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard to get over that, because we hate seeing our political figures that we love do bad things. And we hate it even more when the rags we love report on the things that our favorite politicians are doing. And I've said this before, and I've kind of taken a new policy where I stopped, this probably stopped maybe a year ago. I stopped taking photos of politicians. I don't go on casual meetings with them or anything like that. I don't, and it's no offense to any of the politicians I like. I have to keep neutral, because there may be one day where I have to expose something. The irony being, of all people who have given me this advice before, was Jonathan Stickland. Jonathan Stickland said, one day, Tony Ortiz, you may have to write an article about me, and I hope that you will. And I think 3-4 years later, the whole Pale Horse scandal with Fuentes, and now he's gone. Now he's not running the ship anymore. So these things happen, and but I think communication is really important, to your point.
Yeah.
So full disclosure, we stopped recording, and then I remembered I had questions for you. The Secretary of State complaint. There's a lot of drama behind that.
And you broke that too.
Did break that, and so for those that aren't aware, there's this complaint, and I'm kind of summarizing it up, so please correct me if I'm wrong. There's a complaint out to the Secretary of State that you attempted to, I think, bribe or coerce your opponent, Helen Lovelace, to drop from her race and be your vice chair. And that you would make her your vice chair. So the deal was, you drop from your race, I'll make you your vice chair. And according to these people in their complaint, this is something that's illegal. And I've seen the code, and it does seem to fit some of that. I think I'm not a lawyer, but there's that. Okay, and so tell me about, you received a complaint.
Yep.
You talked with sheriff or SOS.
Very recently, the investigating sergeant with the Attorney General's office. So I'll set the stage for this. What the complaint was about was, and I said it, right there in front of the entire executive committee meeting when the current interim chair was elected. This was 3 days after the runoff. I'm sorry, not the runoff, the primary election. And I got 51% more votes than she did. So it wasn't even close. And I said that if you were to, choose not to run in the runoff, then, and extend this for 2.5 more months, then I would nominate you as first vice chair of the county party, and we can show everybody that we both meant what we've been saying all along about uniting the party, and we'll make an example ourselves. And I said, and I first said that to her 2 days prior or a day prior over the phone, and she came back and said the same thing to me. Said, well, you withdraw, and I'll nominate you first vice chair. She claims now that was a joke, but...
Okay, so she admits she said it, but she was just kidding.
That's right.
But she has admitted that she has done the exact same thing that you're being investigated.
That's right. But she said it was,
but hers was a joke.
Sarcastic. Yeah. And she just like...
I sarcastically run red lights all the time.
Yeah, that's a good one. But just like, the idea is out there that I'm somehow saying she personally was behind that leaked text thread and the scheme in there. She's defending that she didn't file this complaint with the Secretary of State. I never thought she did. I never intimated she did. But anyway, long story short, everybody at that executive committee meeting recognized that for what it was, that I was making a genuine offer to start healing a very divided, fractious party. I said, it's absolutely your prerogative to continue running. We all have that choice. And again, I said all of this out in the open.
Yeah.
So it was sometime later, I got a tip from somebody, a precinct chair, I don't know, a couple of weeks before I read it in Current Revolt. So sorry, you didn't break it to me. No, a precinct chair with direct knowledge of the complaint tipped me off. So I looked up statute. So what they alleged was election code violation for coercion, which, if you read the statute, is pretty much making threats, and bribery. And that I would be violating my oath of office when I win. So that seems a lot like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, this was filed with the Secretary of State, who does not handle such criminal complaints. It says right on their website, they handle election matters, like the actual election, election judges, irregularities, etc. For this type of stuff, don't go to them. But on the form, the very form that whoever filed this complaint had to fill out, first it asked, cite the actual statute, the code, the legal code that you're complaining about, that you feel was violated. So they had to list that there in the form. The form also says, for criminal complaints, ain't our department, we refer these things to the Office of the Attorney General. And so they did that, and they wrote up a letter. It's not like they just forwarded an email.
Yeah.
They wrote up the letter summarizing the substance of the complaint and sent that over to the Attorney General's office. So Sergeant Quinn with the Attorney General's office called me a couple of weeks ago now, and he questioned me. And it didn't take a rocket scientist to understand the nature of the questioning. He was basically checking the boxes of statute, as is his job. And he told me very plainly over the phone that there's nothing here, there's no violation of the law, and he was going to recommend that this be closed.
Now, real quick,
Yeah.
your opponent supporters are the people that are really promoting this suit or this complaint. They claim that because of the fact that you revealed what this sheriff or this guy from the state, just your conversation with him, that you're guilty of something else now. And that he's in trouble.
Right.
And now they're throwing more spaghetti at the wall. I think they filed more complaints against things.
I'm not an attorney. I don't even play one on TV. But so apparently if any old rando calls up to their office, they're not going to comment on an ongoing investigation. I think there's a different standard for the actual people being investigated, what they tell the people being investigated. So if he broke the law, I would be shocked because he's an actual sergeant with the Attorney General's office. He should know this.
I would assume if I'm under investigation for something and a police officer calls me and has a conversation with me, and I decide to be public after that conversation about it, that's my prerogative. It's not the officer's fault that I decided to be neutral. But if somebody directly calls the officer without you being involved and says, "Hey, can you comment on this?" and they say, "Absolutely not. It's an open investigation." Well,
and I even asked him on the phone. I said, politics being what it is, my opponent's supporters are running around saying I'm under criminal investigation. Can I share what you just told me? And he said, yeah, just bear in mind it's not closed yet. It's got to go up the chain. So just don't say anything that's not factual.
It's interesting. The same people that it kept me up to date relatively with this complaint were also like, oh, but he exposed something from the investigation, and we're going to file a complaint on that. And you're saying it's like throwing spaghetti on the wall. It to me, it's just so petty. It's almost like the Donald Trump thing where they're just throwing charges at him just to try to get him like not to win and to ruin his run. And it's so petty. It's goofy. And so all this happened. You put out, and then we even reported because when we report stuff, just we get it from two sources, and so we reported that, you know, that I think it was the sheriff that had said, "There's nothing here, don't see anything," et cetera, et cetera. And then now, I guess there's been another email out that they've referred it to the DA.
Right, which is...
So what's going on there? Yeah.
Well, that's where complaints like this belong to begin with.
So you're saying it was filed in the wrong place in the beginning?
Right, and I can believe it was done intentionally so that this would keep being bounced amongst agencies while the runoff was going, so that it probably won't be concluded until after the runoff, to enable them to run out there claiming, which they're doing right now, I'm under criminal investigation. When I fully anticipate when early voting starts on Monday, they're going to be out there at the polls with little flyers saying Shelby Williams is under criminal investigation, and they're probably going to have a picture of my face, behind bars.
And again, your opponent is guilty of the same thing. That's kind of in the sense that she offered the same deal, except hers was a joke.
Theoretically, but it doesn't matter if it's a joke. It's still not against the law. By the way, I just this morning I published a new piece on my blog showing all the details of this. So you're welcome to go check it out. I have the links to the applicable statute that they themselves complained about, as well as their complaint form and the letter from the Secretary of State to the Attorney General's office. Anybody can read this stuff and figure out for themselves that there's no there. And in short, the coercion charge requires a threat to have been made. And interestingly, when I was speaking with Sergeant Quinn, and I just let it be known that she said the same thing to me, he started questioning me about her. Did she make any threats or any of this? I'm like, no, of course not.
Interesting.
And then he called and asked her the same stuff. And the bribery charge means to offer something, quoting statute, of pecuniary value, monetary value. The first vice chair position, I can only nominate. I can't unilaterally appoint. It requires the executive committee to vote on it. Second, it's unpaid, just like the county chair role.
So there's no monetary value.
There's no monetary value. And the oath of office under the Texas Constitution, Article 16, says that I've got to recite the oath of office saying I've not offered anything of value. Same thing, monetary value. So none of it's applicable to this situation. But a criminal investigation is easy to get going. All you got to do is make a complaint to an agency, and they are duty bound to investigate. And even the Texas Ethics Commission issued a unanimous resolution condemning such misleading campaign tactics. They did that back in 2013 or 14.
Yeah, you've seen some crazy stuff being used in campaigns. Was it Beau French, who's now the Tarrant County GOP chair? His opponent called CPS on him.
I didn't even hear about that.
I'm pretty sure it is. And somebody in the comments that's watching this, they can correct me if I'm wrong. But his opponent used CPS to go after him. And they ended up investigating his opponent. And I think it ended up being the campaign manager or something, had to issue an apology. But this guy was under stress just for a thing too. And they were I think they were doing the same thing. They were like, oh, this guy, he's running and he's under CPS investigation for child abuse or something like that. So it's
anybody can make a complaint.
It's so insane the amount of the way people are so litigious. And I was telling somebody who's been keeping me up to date. I'm like, this thing is so petty. I know that Ellen's, at least to my knowledge, she's not behind the complaint or setting it up.
I don't believe she is.
But it's just win your race fairly. What's with the lawsuits? Just win it. If
she certainly hasn't said anything about it.
So I don't know. It's very silly. But any updates on it?
Silly season.
Yeah. Any updates on it since any kind of recent posts or anything?
Other than no, I haven't spoken with the DA yet. I don't even know if it's with their office yet. I know it's going to go there after it's done going through the traps with the Attorney General's office. But again, the DA's office is where stuff like this was supposed to be filed from the beginning. But that's where I think this was engineered, because if it was, it'd already be done.
Interesting.
And they couldn't say on election day that I'm under criminal investigation.
Interesting. Wow. Well,
but we're better than this. Republicans are better than this. And that's honestly one of the many reasons I'm running for GOP chair, is to try to elevate us and reapply the Republican brand so that we regain ground.
Yeah, it's a crappy tactic. If it is a tactic, it seems like there's a lot bigger things for the SOS and the DA to investigate, at least in my opinion. You know, if there's something there, then there's something there. And we're all about exposing scams and liars, but it just seems like something so petty that it's just like, I don't know. Very odd. Wrapping up, when is early voting and when's election day?
Early voting starts next Monday, May 20th. There's only 5 days of early voting in the runoff. It's not like a normal election. So it's just Monday, May 20th through Friday, May 24th. Then a 3-day voting hiatus, and election day is on the following Tuesday, May 28th.
Wow, and so that happens during convention.
The tail end of early voting happens during convention. Election day does not, but it is the day after Memorial Day, so all of it's awkward timing.
Right. And you're going to be at convention.
I am going to be at convention next week.
Do you anticipate a lot of fighting, drama at convention?
I would not be surprised at all with the current tenor of the party, and not just in Collin County, Texas-wide, maybe nationally. I wouldn't be surprised. I hope there are no physical altercations like there were at the last Collin County EDC meeting, but I'm not. I'm going to cross my fingers, but I ain't going to hold my breath.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. So anyway, thanks for having me over. Yeah. Thanks for chatting with me. For those that want to follow you, where can they find you on social media? ShelbyHWilliams.com. That's ShelbyHWilliams.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, MeWe, Nextdoor. I'm all over the place. Shelby H. Williams also for Twitter and Facebook?
Yes, okay. For the most part. Awesome. But the links to all my social is on my website.
Great. And for those listening, you can find us currentrevolt.com. Everything else is just Current Revolt. So, Shelby, thanks so much for having me.
Right, thanks a lot, too.
Thanks. Yeah.